Danny, I just figured out that if I switch to Metro PCS, I get 2 Samsung Galaxy phones free.
Cool, Dad.
And I could be a super dad with 2 free Samsung Galaxy phones and call myself Double Galaxy Man.
Or you could give the second phone to your sidekick.
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
That's right. 2 free Samsung Galaxy On 5 smartphones are all yours when you switch to Metro PCS. Metro PCS. Wireless figured out. Coverage not available in some areas. Sales tax not included in phone price. Excludes numbers on the T-Mobile network. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Even with the sexting allegations, the criminal case could come down to one main question for the jury. How could Ross Harris have not noticed his son on the short drive to work that morning or when he came back to his car later that day?
It's a question the Fox 5i team originally investigated in the days after the tragedy 2 years ago. Fox 5i team reporter Randy Travis returns now with this preview of the state's key arguments here, Randy.
Yeah, Tom and Lisa, while many of us say we would never, ever forget our children in a hot car, since the beginning of the century, nearly 600 have died just that way, according to the advocacy group Kids and Cars. Here's why prosecutors believe what happened to Cooper Harris was no accident.
1 month after Cooper Harris died in his dad's hot car, the Fox 5i team watched as Cobb County investigators tried to reenact those horrible conditions. On a similar 90-degree day, with Ross Harris's 2011 Hyundai Tucson parked in the same spot near his office, investigators measured the inside temperature rising to as high as 130 degrees, according to a law enforcement source. Notice how close Cooper's car seat is to the driver's seat. Cooper's head would have been only inches from his dad's elbow, who insists he forgot he was there. This is lead detective Phil Stoddard from the preliminary hearing in 2014, talking about their reenactment with a mannequin.
The head was clearly visible, poking up over the car seat.
And did that demonstrative aid, was that actually a little bit shorter than Cooper?
Yes.
Father and son would share their final meal together at this Chick-fil-A only minutes away from Harris's office as he headed into work that morning. What Harris did next made investigators even more suspicious.
After he left Chick-fil-A, Ross would have to make a left on Pace's Ferry to take Cooper to daycare. But it's at this point that he's telling investigators he forgot his son was right here, and he ends up going straight.
That decision would have come only a few minutes after he had put Cooper into the car seat, kissed his son, and drove out of the Chick-fil-A parking lot. Defense attorneys are expected to argue Harris could have been distracted because evidence shows even during his last meal with Cooper, Ross Harris was texting with women. Nearly 7 hours after he left Cooper inside that car, Harris would get back behind the wheel to drive away with the windows closed. Yet even then, Harris says he did not realize what he had done and drove out of the parking lot.
According to his statement to authorities that was released during the hearing, he has not noticed his dead son in the back seat, even at this point, more than a mile down the road.
Prosecutors have argued the stench inside the car should have been immediate, a smell investigators say they noticed after arriving on the scene that fateful day. But other experts suggest it would have taken much longer for such a smell to materialize. And one report raised questions about whether Ross Harris actually had any sense of smell at all.
Now, Harris faces both malice murder and felony murder charges. Malice murder means he meant to lock his child in that car to kill him. Felony murder means Cooper died while in the commission of another crime, cruelty to children. Ross Harris leaving his son in that car seat on a hot summer day in Georgia.
Very, very interesting case. And you said 600 children have died this way since the year 2000. How many of those parents drove more than a mile before they realized that their child was in the back seat?
Yeah, Amber Rollins is the director of Kids and Cars, and she says it's not uncommon. She says that just like in the case of Ross Harris here, that people get in their car at the end of the day and they drive, well, to daycare, thinking they need to pick up their child, not realizing that their child is dead in the back seat. She says it happens more than we might think.
So many, the whole thing is so unthinkable.
Yeah. How many of those parents convicted of murder, though?
She says none. This would be the first prosecution of anyone. She says there's been no evidence up until now that anybody intentionally left their child in a car to kill them.
All right. Randy, thanks. Okay. You can depend on us for complete.
The verdict is in proper form to be received by the court. At this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to publish the verdict. Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
In the Superior Court of Cobb County, State of Georgia versus Justin Ross Harris, defendant, case number 14-9-3124, verdict form. We, the jury, find as follows: count 1, malice murder. As to count 1, we find the defendant guilty this 14th day of November 2016. Killed only 4 persons. Count 2, felony murder. As to count 2, we found the defendant.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the King Jordan Radio Show for November 17th, 2016. This is King Jordan Radio, Season 5, Episode 12. Well, after 2 years and some months, the hot cart death trial did reach a verdict, and we have a great panel of experts here to recap that with us. First of all, he is a forensic expert. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Joseph Scott Morgan. Good evening, Joe. How are you?
Hey, Jordan. How are you? Hey, to everybody out in the listening audience, and it's great to be with you once again. Thanks for having me on board.
You got it. Next up, we have a criminal defense attorney out of the Seattle area, worked on the Amanda Knox case, very famous, very worldwide, world-renowned. Ladies and gentlemen, Ann Bremner joins us. Good evening, Ann. How are you?
Thanks. I'm great. Thanks for that awesome introduction, and great to be on with you and your awesome panel.
You betcha. And finally, he covered the Jody area's case, all cases around that area. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a defense attorney out of the Arizona area. Please welcome back Mr. Dwane Cates. Good evening, Dwane. How are you?
Good evening, King. It's awesome to be on your show, and it's a pleasure to be on this panel.
Indeed. And Joseph, let me start with you. The verdict came down with Monday. First of all, let's talk about the case. Weren't you a little concerned when they went out to the weekend, because it seemed like it was going pretty long for a case that looked like a slam dunk at one point? So walk me through what you were thinking over the weekend, and then when we got the verdict Monday.
Yeah, it did. It went on for, it was kind of protracted. We had the holiday, the Veterans Day holiday. I was on the air with Vinny in Atlanta covering the case, and we were just, we were all kind of sitting around the table, scratching our heads, thinking, why in the world is it taking so long? But then the jury did something interesting. They had requested to see the video again from the parking lot, and they specifically requested not just to see the video, but to see the wide-angle shot. And we knew, or at least I did, at that point in time, that I felt as though that this was going to be the nail in the coffin for him, because I was really thinking they were going to have a hard time proving malice murder, which it's a pretty rigorous, hoop to jump through. But when they started looking at that video, and we started looking at it again very closely, Jordan, it just kind of jumped out at you what they were looking at. I can talk about that if you want to. It was just kind of one of those aha moments. It's kind of a rare thing that you have, I think, in court from an evidentiary standpoint.
Yeah, no question. And we'll get back to you. Give me a couple of things that you felt were a slam dunk for the prosecutors that they definitely got them on, and that you saw this coming, that this verdict was a just verdict.
Well, I mean, luckily everything on the internet's written in ink. It's not written in pencil. And he had of course, viewed a video of a hot car and animals in danger of death. And then he had, of course, a statement on that he'd written that sometimes you need a break from your kid, before this happens. And then, of course, he's sexting, and including with underage girls, the whole time his baby's dying in that heat, for over 7 hours. So those were the top three things for me as a prosecutor, that those are slam dunks. I mean, he couldn't be clairvoyant. He meant to do it. This is malice murder. He had intention. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a felony murder. And when I say just a felony murder, I don't demean that kind of a charge or conviction,
right.
But the malice murder was important.
And Dwane, let me go to you. You were out 3 days. What was your take on this trial? And did you ever think for a second that he might be found not guilty?
I really didn't, and I didn't think for a second. And last time we talked about this was during the trial, and the fact that
right.
the texting he was doing was with an underage girl, and it was sexual in nature, even with other people, just really was the nail in the coffin. I mean, jury trials are a lot more about perception than they are reality, and the perception of him was absolutely horrible.
That's a very true thing. Do you think if this was a woman, Dwane, that the woman might have had a better chance of getting a not guilty?
Well, I don't know if it had to do with man or woman. It had to do with what he was doing while the kid was in the car dying. Okay, if a woman had been, sexting with a underage boy while the kid was dying in the car, I think she would have been equally, it may even have been worse for her. So it wasn't about whether it was a man or a woman. It's about what he was doing while the kid was in the car dying, and it just wasn't a good case for a jury trial, because the jury was just never going to like him.
And back to you, Joe Scott. Give me your biggest takeaways from this trial. It was a big trial. Everybody was following it from A to Z. What did you take out of this trial that you covered from A to Z?
There were a lot of moving parts to it, Jordan, and they presented so much evidence. From a forensic standpoint, they presented a lot of electronic evidence, and I kind of felt like at times it was almost, I said this a couple of times, it felt as though that it was death by technology, because, there's only so much technology that the jury can listen to. It just went on and on and on and on, and it was almost insufferable. Some of the reporters that were in the courtroom were talking about how, the jurors were kind of drifting off. They saw a few of them nodding, during the case, and rightfully so. When you start to talk about some of a lot of the technical aspects of this thing, there was a lot of salacious things that came out of the technology, but they really went to great lengths to talk about how all of this stuff works, and you're running a real dangerous course here, I think, with the jury from an evidentiary standpoint. That's just my opinion. I'm sure that counsel can offer up that. But
yeah,
for me,
let's
the
go
biggest,
to Ann.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I completely
What's your
agree.
biggest takeaways?
Well, I think one thing we've seen in coverage of this case in the aftermath takeaway is, we see more prosecutions of cases like this, because we've seen across the country cases of people doing the exact same thing. But my answer to that is they're not Harris. And what he did, was so extreme. They went back to the car with the light bulbs, that he was sexting, that he said before the fact he's probably going to do it. And he looked at how to do it and the fact that he'd be successful in killing him. So I think, all of those things. And he looks awful. I mean, he looks like somebody who's guilty. I mean, it's just perception again, as has been suggested. The whole package was very poor for the defense. And even if they put on that he loved the baby, and this is what really struck me as a takeaway, when you show videos of him with that baby and playing and teaching him to say the word banana, do you think that helps? I don't think so. I think it basically makes him look more demonic and more guilty, because the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that he caused this child's death. And to see him with that child in a way that the jury bonds with that baby, I put that's the final nail in the coffin.
All right, let's go to you, Dwane. What did your takeaways from this trial?
Well, when you were talking about the technical aspects of it, part of that is, prosecutors tend to over-try their cases because they get really, really, really worried that they're going to miss something. And I had a trial earlier this year, and, we got to talk to the jurors afterwards, and they said, we always ask, what bothered you about the trial? And then the juror asked the prosecutor, why did you keep going over and over and over and over this stuff that really meant nothing to the case? And they said, well, we were afraid we were going to miss something, that was important. So they tend to over-try their cases, and in that case, it didn't matter because they kind of had a slam dunk anyway. But it, the jury said, well, kind of, why didn't you stop them? And I said, because I thought it was good. I thought they were putting you guys to sleep, and I didn't care. I just let them go. I could have objected as cumulative, but so what? It's turning the jury off. So.
And finally, Joe Scott, you worked on, you followed this case from the get-go. Looking back at this case, what is the number one takeaway? You'll always think
I don't know.
When you think of this case, besides Baby Cooper, obviously.
The thing that was really chilling about this whole thing, Jordan, was that final piece of evidence that the jury asked for, and it had nothing to do with the telephones. It had everything to do with the CCTV views that they were showing from the parking lot. And if I can just kind of paint the narrative, I'll try to make it very, very quick. But when he left that car after dropping his light bulbs off, the view of the parking lot is pulled way back, and you can see him walking away from the car. He never drops his head down below the level of the roof. He just kind of opens the door, throws him in, and shuts the door very quickly, and then walks away. As he's walking away, he meets a person in the parking lot that is walking towards his car. He acknowledges him, and then walks a few steps past him, and then stops and scopes over his right shoulder to see if that person is going to stop and look in that car. And when they showed that slow motion, you really got a feeling at that point in time that he was there using that car as a modality to kill that child. He was there for one more moment just to make sure that person was not going to stop and literally wind up rescuing Cooper. And it sent a chill down my spine on air when I saw this for the first time, and I knew when the jury had and that it was the final nail in the coffin.
Just a wild case, and it's finally put to rest. Okay, let's talk about this South Carolina alleged serial killer, but more importantly, the mother comes on 48 hours and talks. Let's hear the mother, and we'll discuss her on the other side.
So he's back in South Carolina. He did his time in Arizona. He gets his real estate license.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised that he was able to get that real estate license, given the fact that he was a sex offender?
No, I didn't know it mattered.
Didn't know it mattered.
And I came up with it. He was never a kid that would sit at a desk and stay there all day.
Right.
I suggested real estate.
He became a real estate agent.
He loved it.
And you must have...
He took off like gangbusters. He sold at least one house a day. He worked hard.
But Richie...
Todd is someone who stays to himself pretty much. He's a loner. You know, easy for him to entertain himself. It's like I told you, he read the whole encyclopedia.
When he was a kid.
Yeah.
But I want to just come back to this for a moment. You just described for me 7 murders that your son committed that he told you about. Mm. And it was all because the people were mean to him?
They embarrassed him.
And so he killed them.
They embarrassed him. And you know, anybody, I don't care who you are, and whether you have a temper or you don't have a temper, nobody wants to be embarrassed. And that's hard to work out from.
After telling you that he killed 7 people, what did you say to him?
How could you do this? Because I didn't understand. I didn't understand how in the world this little boy that hit on me one day when he was little in the clothes hamper. And I couldn't find him. And I was hysterical. So I called the fire department. Isn't that what all new mothers do?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they came in all their gear and their helmets. And one of them, a great big guy, found Todd in a clothes hammer. And he pulled him out. And Todd just giggled. He just giggled. Well, the people that understand him and know him now just don't understand that Todd could do this. This is not the man they know. I could ask Todd for anything, and he would get it for me. He had everything going for him. But it's not like he went out daily and killed somebody. There was a lot of time between the first ones and then the others, which I know that doesn't mean much to the families, and I'm sorry. But he wasn't a serial killer.
And Bremner, let me start with you. What is your takeaway from this mom? Is she in denial? Is she just taking for her son the needle, if you will? What do you make of mother?
What I make of mother, all of what you just stated, Jordan. And when I was a DA and I had murder cases and the mother took the stand and said things like that, I had one question for her. You're his mother, right? Thank you, no further questions. I mean, what is she going to say? You know what I mean? I mean, I listened to that and I thought deja vu all over again. That's exactly what you hear from a mother in a murder case. Doesn't make him any less guilty. And really, she's apologizing and saying, but there was time between some of the murders and she didn't used to be like this? Nice defense, Mom.
Yeah, Dwane, have you ever witnessed or been a part of a defendant that you represented and the mother was anything like this mother?
Their children no matter what, even when they do horrible things. And that right. So most mothers, you know, they can't fathom their child being, you know, this bad. And so they just, you know, they mentally just go somewhere else. And to them, you know, no matter, I mean, I'm not a mom, I'm a dad, but you know, my wife, I mean, our kids are, you know, in their late 20s, and they're always going to be her little baby. I mean, that's just the way it is. Right. And that's just the way, you know, that's just the way mothers are wired. And quite frankly, you know, I wouldn't expect much less than what she said. I mean, you can't put any stock in it, but that's just kind of the way it is.
So say you, Joe Scott Morgan. You've been following this also, I believe, right?
Yeah. I was on with Ashley Banfield the first night that this came out, and I got to tell you, I was shocked the first night when I talked about it with her on the air. Just simply the fact that, you know, this lady was found, you know, chained up in this metal container, but I didn't think I could be. It was roughly the next day that the interview dropped, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because I'm still not convinced that they have all of the bodies, to be perfectly honest with you. She was talking about how there was a great space of time between the first ones, which I believe, and I'd like to hear what Dwane says about this, I think those 4 people that he killed in the beginning were all killed in Arizona at a motorcycle shop. And then, of course, the other ones in South Carolina, I'm still not convinced he has killed more people. And that he's just kind of waiting around to tell them, oh, by the way, I've got a few more. This guy had some serious anger issues. Apparently he was rather reactive. He's not a big planner. But I think that the most insidious thing about this whole case is the fact, not so much that he killed these people, but the fact that he kept this woman chained up for all this time in that box. I think he's probably some kind of really sadistic sexual predator. I think we only know very little bit at this point. It's been released about what he's done to this woman. I think it's probably pretty horrific. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens if he rolls over on any more cases that might be out there.
That's an excellent point. And Ann, do you remember Mrs. Anthony taking a stand and saying some things for her daughter, Casey Anthony, back in 2011? And that seemed like she was in denial.
Absolutely. I was at that trial. I was there for MSNBC and some HLN. And you bet she was. But, that's Mom.
Mm-hmm.
She's always going to be Mom. But that's where you discount with the jury. She doesn't think she raised this monster. She doesn't think, how could Casey have killed her own child? I will say one thing on the men versus women that we've talked about as offenders. The women seem to get diagnosed and the men seem to get demonized. Casey walked. Andrea Yates and Sandy defense. I mean, you wouldn't see a woman necessarily in the position of Ross Harris. And so I think that someone like Harris, was so easy to convict. And, of course, this serial killer will be too. But Mom is always Mom, and I've yet to see a mom get up and condemn her child in a courtroom in cases I've covered and cases I've handled.
That's true. And you would agree with that also, I guess, Dwane, right?
Yeah, I do 100%. And with regard to, are there more bodies out there? At this point, I kind of doubt it. Usually, once serial killers start spilling the beans, they spill it all, and they don't usually 8 months later they don't come out with 5 or 6 more. I mean, I'm sure it happens once in a while, but most of the time, once they crack and start talking, they kind of just let it all go, unless he's particularly smart and thinks he can use it later for some sort of to keep him off the death penalty or something. But usually once they start spilling the beans, it all comes out at once.
Yes. Let's go to the man indicted in New York and New Jersey bombing.
CBS News Online is reporting that an indictment has been handed down in the New York-New Jersey bombing case of Ahmed Khan Rahimi. On Wednesday, an 8-count indictment was announced charging 28-year-old Ahmed Khan Rahimi in the September 17th attacks. In the attacks, Rahimi is accused of setting off a bomb in Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood that injured 30 people. In New Jersey, a pipe bomb was also detonated along a Marine Corps charity race in Seaside Park, just before thousands of runners were scheduled to take part in the 5K race, according to authorities.
Okay, and let me start with you. Is this indictment correct, in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think all the evidence is there. I mean, it's bizarre domestic terrorism, but I think it's absolutely correct. And it doesn't take much to indict, as we know. We always hear that the grand jury would indict a ham sandwich, but it's correct in any event.
Yes. Wonder why it's always ham sandwich instead of like bologna or.
But, I don't know. Bologna sandwich sounds too cookie. It's got to be a ham sandwich.
Dwane Cates, is this guy going to get off in any way? Is this a slam dunk case also, right?
Well, there's no such thing as a slam dunk case, because I've seen prosecutors screw things up, all the time. Now, federal prosecutors, like there's going to be in this case, they're going to put the best and the brightest on it, and so I would assume that this guy is going to get convicted just based on the fact that he had journals where he'd written, that he was going to do this. They have him on video.
Yes.
I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence in this case. and they've got him in 3 different courts, from what I understand. They have him in 2 different federal districts and a state case also. So I think it would be rather difficult for him to squirm out of this.
Absolutely. Okay, before we go to Joe Scott, Ann, I want to thank you. I know you rocked around for the meeting, so thanks so much
Thank you.
for coming aboard.
It's such a pleasure, as always. Take care.
Absolutely. Please come along again. Okay, let me go to you, Joe Scott. What is your take on this indictment of the bombing guy?
Yeah, I just relative to the evidence, the actual physical evidence, that they, as Dwane has pointed out, I'm sure that they've dug in great detail into this case, knowing the feds. I hope that they've established a line chronologically and with physical evidence that can connect him back to anyone else that may have been involved with this. I'm sure many things on certain levels are unknowable at this point, at least at our level. I just hope that all that's been taken advantage of moving forward relative to any other cases that might bubble up to the top relative to this guy's modalities.
Absolutely. Okay, this next story has been trending for a while, and I wanted to get our lawyers' take, and you also, Joe. President Phil Jackson of the New York Knicks called LeBron James, his team, a posse, and they thought he was a prejudiced and racist. Some people said he was prejudiced and racist or disrespectful. Here's a cut of some of that, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Yeah, I agree with them because Phil can be condescending, and I think this was a little subtle jab at LeBron and his friends. And the reason they're upset, I really agree. I don't think it was racist. I don't think Phil Jackson's a racist or anything like that. But I do think it was a little bit demeaning and disrespectful because, and it tells you how LeBron and Maverick and his guys, Rich Paul, his agent, view themselves, and as they should, as businessmen. They view themselves just like the executives that run these teams or the executives that run a company. And in fairness, Maverick Carter is the CEO of LRMR, marketing, LeBron's marketing firm. He runs Spring Hill Entertainment, which has all these television shows. Rich Paul is an agent who doesn't only represent LeBron, but Ben Simmons, John Wall, Tristan Thompson, other top players around the league. So they feel like, look, if Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, Steve Kerr, Bob Myers, the GM, Travis Schlenk, the assistant GM, if they were somewhere, you wouldn't refer to them as Lacob's posse. And so that's where they're coming from. We're executives, we're businessmen. Give us that respect.
Well, they also need to understand, in my opinion, what level they're operating at. And there are no victims at the level they're operating at. And so, listen, I love everything LeBron James stands for, the work he does in Akron. I respect the fact that he's built a path for his friends to move up and operate into the university he operates in. But I think they need to be careful here. Because, again, at LeBron's level, he is not a victim. And
do you think they're putting themselves in the victim category? I mean, they're just saying, look, we're offended. They feel like we're on a level where we can talk to Phil Jackson as equals. And if you offend us, we're not just going to take it. Okay, we're not saying we're victims. We're just telling you we didn't like that comment.
I don't get offended a lot. And I know I can't, everybody can't be me. But I don't think these guys should be offended. For one, because my response would be, look, if we a posse, we the best. That's what I would say. If this is a posse, everybody should want to join. That would be my initial reaction. But also, Chris, I had someone do some research on the word posse and how it's used. You can go dig up and find people publicly commenting about Donald Trump's posse, Hillary Clinton's posse.
I haven't seen that.
Carson Wentz's posse. People use the word posse a lot. And
Her mix a lot. My posse's
yeah.
LeBron.
And so I'm not sure if Phil, I do think Phil was taking a shot at them, and this was really about Pat Riley. And this is
You
really
think that
oh yeah, I think
okay.
this is about the old guard in the NBA saying, look, man, if we cater this whole league to the athletes, everybody's going to want special treatment. Everybody's going to want their mom and friends flying on the planes because that's what young athletes do. I think this is the old guard pushing back against LeBron because LeBron is ascending to higher and higher power. And what comes with ascending to higher and higher power is turbulence. And this is just turbulence. This isn't someone trying to be offensive to them. And again, when you start expressing offense, now you're ascribing motive or you're ascribing an agenda or a superiority that I don't think Phil was trying to say that I'm superior to these guys. He was just making a comment.
I like that they came out and said something because I do think it shows how much LeBron has more power in the league than Phil Jackson. I mean, Phil Jackson is a huge name, as big as just about any in the league, but LeBron is essentially challenging him because of what he said. I'll say this. You mentioned LeBron setting up his guys to do these great things. I do think that is a great model that I wish more athletes would do. To talk about posse or entourage, a lot of these players, they'll just have guys hang out with them and hit the clubs and kick it and do all the things socially that they want to do and not put those guys in positions to be empowered. So when that athlete's done, those guys may be in their early 30s or whatever. What do they have? And they milked you dry. They took a lot of your money, not purposely, but you ended up spending all this money on them. Whereas LeBron put his guys in position to now when LeBron's done playing, Rich Paul will still be a top agent. Maverick Carter will still run these businesses. I would like to see an athlete say, if you grew up with me and you my boy and I told you, if I make it, I'm going to take care of you. All right, man, I'm in the NBA now. You got 6 years to graduate from college. All right, and then you get your degree, and then you'll come and work for me at a high level. You know, things like that, put them in position to be empowered rather than just hanging out with you and sucking you dry of your money.
Dwane Cates, Phil Jackson, when he said the word posse, do you think that it should be considered racist? If so, what's your reasoning?
I mean, this whole everybody's offended by everything at some point has to stop. And the bottom line with being offended, and here's the absolute bottom line with being offended. To be offended is a choice. Okay? True. In order to be offended, you have to choose to take offense to something that somebody said. And you can take offense. In fact, I'm probably offending people right now. And I know I offend people on a daily basis because I pretty much just say what's on my mind most of the time. And you know what? I don't care. Because, see, when they choose to be offended, it don't bother me. It's bothering them. They get to go home and stew about being offended. Okay? And you know what we need to do? We need to quit being offended and try to let's do something that's productive. You know, because 5 years ago, calling somebody the group of friends to hang out with, it was a posse, was a good thing. And now all of a sudden, 5 years later, now, oh no, you can't call me a posse. That has negative connotation. So, you know, we're going to let people control the narrative to the point where all of a sudden, you know, we're going to have we're going to have to get signed permission to use certain terms. You know, I won't go on your show, Jordan. If I'm going to go on your show, you need to send me a list of terms that your listeners might find offensive so I don't say them. You know, I mean, it's crazy, and I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of it.
Yeah, that's very well said. And Joe Scott, what do you think? He said the word posse, and then LeBron James got all bent out of shape and had lost all respect to this guy. What is your take on that word? Is it should it be offensive? Should it be racism? In your opinion?
I think the graveyard's filled with people right now that wish that they were still around that could be offended. You know, there are a lot of other things in life to get in a twist about. This is not one of them. And the thing about it is, you know, the commentator was making comments about LeBron James, saying that he should that they should be treated with the same amount of respect as other people that are in management positions. Well, he said that the other guy said you're now in an area where you can't afford to be offended. Well, if you feel like you're mature enough to be in a management position, successful people learn to keep their mouth shut and just let things like this pass. To me, this shows just a blatant disregard for maturity. I mean, he's certainly not somebody I would want to work for if he's this easily offended by a word. So yeah, it's pointless. It's absolute just pointless.
Very well said. I believe we got Mary here. She checks in and she says hello. Good evening, Mary. You're live on the King Jordan Radio Show.
Hi. Good evening. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, Mary.
Hi, Joseph, and hi, Mr. Cates. I don't know if I've talked to you before.
Hey, Mary.
I think you have.
No.
But anyway, a good point, Dwane Cates, on it's time to stop being politically correct and just say what you want to say. And if people get offended, that's their problem.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I want to go back to the Ross Harris case.
Yes.
I'm very involved with social media, Facebook, and Twitter, and I was very surprised to find that today and yesterday, after the verdict came out, that there's a lot of people that are not right with that verdict. They don't think it was malice murder. They think it was, criminal negligence, that he was otherwise preoccupied. And the rhetoric that I see is they're saying that why was the sexting allowed in? So I guess this is a question for the defense. Had that sexting stuff had not allowed in, they really wouldn't have had a lot because the searches that they said, police admitted that the searches did not really happen. The police said it had, but it really was proven that he never searched for those things. So this is what I'm asking you, because the way I answered is, well, you have to establish a state of mind just before this thing happened to determine where was his mind set at. And if he is otherwise preoccupied with sexting, you have to bring it in no matter what. And a lot of people feel that he got demonized because of it.
That's an excellent point. And Dwane, I know if you were counsel, you would have fought tooth and nail to keep that out of there. But what do you think?
Well, and I think because it happened during the time the child was dying, okay, it showed what he was doing. I think and that's probably going to be an issue that's going to be taken up on appeal, because I'm sure that they challenged that and tried to keep that out. Now, what I do sometimes, I try to take the bad evidence and turn it into something good for me. And it was a great point. Is okay. Well, this is why he was preoccupied, because he was thinking of something else other than his child in his car, during this time, and he got preoccupied with that. And and with any kind of addiction, and sexual addictions and addiction, you sometimes can get lost and lose track of things. And I think the malice murder, there's enough evidence to support the verdict for malice murder, but if it probably should have been just the felony murder in the case, but it's a tough one. I mean, that was a really, really tough case for the defense, because you had a defendant that wasn't real likable, doing things that people really hated him for. So it was going to be an uphill battle no matter what.
Yeah, and also to bring you a different, I think, I don't know who brought up the fact about whether had it been a woman. It so happens that I live in Virginia, and our neighborhood vet, just happened 5 years ago, left her baby in the car when she went off to work and forgot to drop him off at daycare. In her case, because she was like the pillar of society, she was well liked. She had thousands in the community come rally on behalf and establish a fund for her legal and everything, and they had rallies and all kinds of stuff. She ended up getting convicted of 2 counts, or she pleaded guilty for 2 counts of misdemeanor, I guess, child abuse and endangerment or whatever, and she did not serve any time. She got community hours working in a shelter, in a animal shelter, and she got absolutely no time. And the thing about it, she had done it one time before, and she had forgotten her child one time before, but she had gone back and gotten him before. So what do you take on that?
Well, I mean, it happens in Arizona all the time. I mean, especially because in Arizona when it's 115 degrees outside, it happens a lot. The deaths happen a lot quicker than in other places because the temperatures go up so fast. And, very few people are charged. Sometimes they're charged. A lot of them are charged with child abuse. Nobody's prosecuted for homicide because, there are things that happen, and I mean, I couldn't imagine forgetting my child, but in today's world when we're so busy, we're over busy with everything that I could, it can happen, but they don't charge homicide. That's the only case I've ever heard of where they've charged somebody with actual first-degree murder in one of these hot car deaths.
Well, thank you very much, and you all have a good evening.
Well, thanks for calling in.
Thank you, Mary. And, Joe, let me ask you on that one. What Mary said in regards to the woman with the animal. What's your take?
Oh, well, it's what Dwane was saying. This is, it's, I don't know if you can call it historic or not, but it is the very first time that this is tried for malice or as known in other places, first degree homicide. You have to go back to the factor. What the factor is here for me as a forensic scientist is that if you're going to buy into the fact that this was malice murder, that vehicle, and this is what's so chilling, that vehicle became just like what the courts are saying is that vehicle, or the prosecutor's saying that vehicle became just like a handgun or a rope or a knife. It was a means to an end. It was a modality and it's the most, and that's what the jury couldn't get by in this. I think that it was so horrific for them that out of all the ways he could have killed his child, he made an active choice, go out and utilize this car as essentially a mobile oven to kill this child with. He said, well, I don't think I'm going to use a gun. I'm not going to use a knife. I think I'll just let him bake to death. And, like Dwane had mentioned, he was unlikable to begin with. You put that together with that, and that's a recipe for guilt. I mean, they're going to hang this guy, and that's what happened. Will it come up on appeal? Yeah, I think that it will. I don't know if malice will stand on appeal. I felt like that it was a very tough boundary to kind of get past. I've no doubt in my mind that it was felony homicide, but malice was much more difficult. I think that it's going to have a hard time standing up on appeal, though.
Yeah, and what is it that he looked up, those searches, Joe? Do you remember?
Yeah. They claimed that he had looked up the dangers of leaving a pet. And the court concluded, and the prosecution didn't dispel this, the defense argued that he never had actually looked this stuff up. And so that puts a completely different spin on that, and that's why I think that malice is going to be very difficult. However, what he had done that particular day was he was texting with at least four women while Cooper was baking to death. And whether or not this was related to a sexual addiction, which I don't doubt that he does have a horrible problem with this, it was too much for the jury to bear. I think this case had so much emotion to it when it came to this child, and I think they were able just to kind of get past this whole thing, which kind of surprised me because this was really big for the prosecution going in. They really just kind of got past this whole idea that he was searching these things, and the defense, they scored points when they, at least in my mind, they did when they said that, he hadn't actually done these searches, and the prosecution didn't do anything to dispel that.
Yes, and finally, let's go back to last week, Dwane. Not so much with the verdict of the president, the reaction of Donald Trump with the rioting. What is your take on that, Dwane? The people rioting.
Well, I mean, I think he had the one tweet where he was a little irritated in the middle of the night, but again, it's pretty clear that the rioters are paid agitators that are out there trying to cause problems. I mean, everybody's got the right to protest. Whatever your position is, get out in the streets and get the permits and peaceably march, and that's an absolute right. But when you start burning cars and turning things over, I mean, I think Donald Trump did a great job on 60 Minutes of telling people to stop. I think 60 Minutes, absolutely, neglected to mention the people that are beating up Donald Trump supporters. Not one mention of that. But when it came to Donald Trump supporters, harassing other people, that was a big deal. I think the media's bias is horrible. The New York Times, they can't believe they apologized and then came back and started doing the same stuff over again. I mean, it's one of those deals. It's one of those deals right now. The thing that is really encouraging to me is that the louder the left screams, the more I have confidence that Donald Trump is doing the right thing.
How shocked were you about when you learned that Donald Trump was going to win this thing?
Well, you know what? I was actually shocked because I actually believed the polls, like pretty much everybody else did. But again, when I looked around me, most of my family and friends, and I knew, women, Hispanics, African Americans. I mean, I knew a lot of people that were supporting Donald Trump. And right before the election, I spent time in Wyoming. Two of my best friends from high school had a birthday party that I went to, and that's the heart of coal country, where where you have these towns. My entire town is about 2,000 people where I grew up, and everybody there works either for the coal mine or they work at the coal-fired electrical power plant, and that's where everybody works. And about half of them got laid off, and so
wow.
They were, and you wonder why Wyoming voted 70%, for Donald Trump.
70.
That's why they were the highest margin of victory of any state in the nation, and second was West Virginia, and there was an undercurrent that this was going on, and people were literally afraid, and I'm right now, I don't go on the internet and express any political opinions anymore because you just get vilified for it, and yes. I have a very diverse office of men, women. I don't have any Hispanics right now, but I've had 2 or 3 that's worked for me. I have African Americans in my office. I'm one of the least racist people you'll ever meet. And I was being called a racist and a homophobe, and and it's like, this is insane, and that's what happened was everybody's just sick and tired of over political correctness, and for being called names, because that's what the left does. Is if you don't believe the way they believe, they start calling you names, and they shame you. It's called Trump shaming. There's a new term out there. It's called Trump shaming. You know, and if you say you like Donald Trump, you get avalanched with shame. And you know what? It isn't right. And I was taught something that's made my life very, very easy to live. Is that I'm not allowed to decide if things are good or bad for a year, no matter what happens about anything in my life.
Right.
You know, once something happens, I have to wait a year to see if it's good or bad. So a year from now, when I come on your show, we can talk about whether or not Donald Trump's a good Trump president or a bad president. But until then, you know, we don't know. Because sometimes what you think is the worst thing in your life turns out to be good for you, and sometimes the things you think are the best thing for you, best thing that ever happened to you, turn out to be, you know, like you meet that special girl and everything's happy and it's the best thing that ever happened to you, and you know 6 months later all your shit's in the front yard and there's a restraining order against you. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen.
That is so true. That is so true. And Joe, let me go to you. How shocked were you when you started seeing the vote was going to be who the president was going to be, Donald Trump?
Let's see. Probably not as shocked as a lot of people were. You know, I live in Alabama, and he made some of his first stops here in Alabama, and our senator Jeff Sessions was, you know, who's playing a prominent role now in advising. You know, I think the people here were on board early on. You know, people. There's just a lot of fatigue out there. People tired of being out of work, and people again, like Dwane was saying, it's like you know, I teach at a university too. Keep this in mind, and I'm a conservative guy at a university, which is not, you know, I'm not complaining, but it's a tough gig in the sense that you have to keep your mouth shut about everything. You know, it's almost like on some days it almost feels like you're living in almost a gulag situation, you know, where they've got the Stasi or the secret police that are listening to everything that you say. You know, you're going to get called in for some kind of Title IX offense. So most of us just walk around and just keep our mouth shut. And I don't know. I think that what's really kind of cool at the end of the day is that we've kept our mouth shut. A lot of people have kept their mouth shut just out of fear for what was being said. But you know what? When you're inside a voting booth, and that's what's really cool. You just cast your vote, and votes for cast, and it is what it is. So at the end of the day, I think that it's sage advice from Dwane that we'll see. We'll revisit the situation a year from now and just see how everything turns out. It may be the worst thing in the world, and then again, could get a lot worse, and might turn out to be something really cool. We'll just wait and see.
Very well said. Thanks to Dwane Cates and Joe Scott Morgan. You guys have a great Thanksgiving.
Hey,
and, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, Jordan, thanks for having me on the show. You made me a lot of money tonight by having me on your show. You know why? Because I'm in Las Vegas at a seminar, and every hour I don't spend at the casino, I'm making money just by not being there. So thanks for helping out.
Put 20 on red 6 for me. I'm good for it. Thank you, George. Okay. Thank you, George, for having me on board, man. I really appreciate it. And happy Thanksgiving to all the listeners out there.
Great coverage. Thank you for the great coverage of Cooper.
Oh, yeah. That's sweat, man. That's sweat. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Dwane Cates and Joe Scott Morgan and Bremner Also, shout out to Madeline, Pager, Vicky. Also, I want to give a shout out to Alex Sanchez. Alex Sanchez, earlier, what was it, Tuesday, gave me the news that his daughter's boyfriend, at the age of 30, was killed. So, just say a little prayer for Sir Alex Sanchez. Such a tragedy the way he passed on. If you haven't heard, Joey Jackson will be on in December, as well as Beth Karras. Big month, December. We're not on next week. We are on the following week, which is December 1st. Don't have the name of the guest who will be on. But thank you so much. Remember, have a great Thanksgiving. Follow us on @KingJordanRAD on Twitter. And listen to this on iTunes if you like. Thanks so much to Mary for checking in. Did a good job of plugging the show. Madeline did an excellent job of plugging the show. And Phyllis and all of you, Pager, thanks so much. We're going to go to Madonna. And we're going to leave you with The Borderline from Madonna. And, wow, I keep thinking of Alex and thinking of that Cooper. Say it. Sad indeed.
She recently wrapped her wildly successful Rebel Heart tour, which grossed over $190 million.